My name is Clara Winslow, and at 72, I still wake up at 6 every morning out of habit more than need. The house is quieter now. The kind of quiet that used to feel peaceful, but lately just reminds me how big it is for one person. I live in Eugene, Oregon, a town that smells like rain and pine, even in late summer. Most mornings, I make tea, read a few pages from whatever novel I've borrowed from the library, and fold the laundry while the kettle hums. This morning, though, I was folding something different, a soft yellow baby blanket I'd knitted for my granddaughter, Ivy. The plan was to bring it to her 1-month celebration. I'd spent the evening before baking lemon bars and setting aside a small card for Mira, my daughter. She'd been distant lately, but I told myself that motherhood changes people. It makes them tired, busy, forgetful, not cruel. The kettle began to whistle as I picked up the phone. I smiled before she even answered. "Mira, what time tomorrow I'll bring dessert?" There was a pause. The sound of her breath muffled by movement. Then she said lightly, "Oh, we had it yesterday. Just close family." For a second, I didn't understand what she meant. I must have misheard. Yesterday. Yes, Mom. It was small. Nothing fancy. You didn't miss much. Her tone was soft, almost kind, and that made it worse. I turned off the stove too late. Steam had fogged the window above the sink, and I couldn't see the garden beyond. My hand trembled when I set the phone down. I wanted to ask why, but something told me not to. Dignity is a fragile thing. Once you beg for it, it's gone. The rest of the day passed in a strange fog. I watered the hydrangeas, washed the cups, tried to read, but the words wouldn't hold still. That evening, when the house dimmed and the air smelled of rain, I opened my laptop. Mira's social media page glowed bright against the dark. There she was, standing beside a white cake, her husband's arm around her, Ivy asleep in a cradle of flowers. The caption read, "Our sweet girl's first month, family only," and I sat there, in the quiet kitchen, the whistle still echoing faintly in my ears, wondering when my name had stopped meaning family. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of cold tea and the week's mail. Most of it was harmless utility bills, a flyer from the co-op market, but one envelope made my stomach tighten. My credit card statement. I almost set it aside, thinking I knew what I'd find: groceries, a few gas charges, maybe the electric bill I'd paid online. But when I opened it, the first line stopped me. Enchanted Petal Floral, $2, $8.50. Below it, the Glass Garden Venue, $6, $900. Then Tiny Haven Nursery, $2, $200. In neat black ink. The total came to $12,400. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. My card limit wasn't high, and I'd paid it off every month since Graham passed. Mira's name was there too, small letters beside authorized user. I remembered the day I'd added her standing at the counter of our local branch, telling the young teller it was for emergencies only, a safety net, I'd said, something to make her life easier. The woman on the customer service line was polite when I called. Her voice was crisp, practiced. "Yes, ma'am. Those purchases were made using your daughter's secondary card. They're valid transactions under your account." I thanked her and hung up. The house was silent, except for the rain against the window. I laid the statement flat, smoothing the creases with both hands as if gentleness could make it less real. So I financed the party I wasn't invited to. I whispered. The words sounded absurd, like a riddle no one should have to solve. Graham's voice came back to me then, clear as if he were leaning over my shoulder again in his old flannel shirt. "Trust should always be documented, Clara, even with love." Back then, I'd laughed at his cautious nature. He'd kept every receipt, labeled every drawer in his workshop. I used to call him the librarian with a hammer. Now I understood what he meant. Trust without proof isn't faith, it's wishful thinking. Outside. The rain turned steady, washing the last bits of fog from the window. I folded the statement once, twice, and slid it into a drawer beside my knitting needles. Tomorrow, I told myself, I'd make a list. That night, the house felt heavier than usual, as if it knew something had changed between its walls. The air smelled faintly of rain and lemon soap. My cup of tea had gone cold hours ago. I sat at the kitchen table with a small notepad I'd taken from the library back when I volunteered their lined paper. The kind that steadies your hand even when your thoughts tremble. At the top, I wrote 2 words to do. Then, one by one, the tasks came to me, each like a small exhale. 1. Call the bank, freeze the card. 2. Contact Evelyn Rowe, update estate documents. 3. Change house locks. The first felt practical, the second, protective, the third personal. Graham had installed the original locks himself, 40 years ago. Brass handles that clicked softly, like polite company. But now, they felt too easy to open. I reached for my phone and scrolled through old voicemails. Mira's voice filled the kitchen. Sweet and hurried. Mom, could you transfer a bit this week? The car's acting up. Then another. Months later. You're the best. I promise I'll pay you back soon. The tone never changed, always gratitude without accountability. I'd mistaken it for affection. The truth hit me quietly. Not like thunder, but like slow dawn, my silence had been permission. Every time I said nothing, I told her it was fine to take more. I'd confused love with rescue, and in doing so, I'd erased my own boundaries. I put down the phone and looked at the list again. My handwriting, shaky at first, had straightened line by line, the way a spine remembers how to stand. The kettle sat idle on the stove, reflecting the soft glow of the lamp. I folded the list neatly and placed it beside my teacup. As if anchoring my resolve to something ordinary, outside, the rain had stopped. The sound of dripping gutters punctuated the stillness. Rhythmic, sure. For the first time in a long while, I knew exactly what tomorrow would bring. A week passed before I heard from Mira again. The house had settled into a new kind of quiet, one that no longer felt like absence but preparation. I'd called the bank, closed the card, and spoken briefly with my attorney, Evelyn. She'd promised to send over updated estate forms by the end of the month. Everything, for once, was in motion. It was a Tuesday morning when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. The caller ID flashed Mira, and something inside me braced itself. Mom, she said, breathless, not waiting for me to speak. The florist just called your card didn't go through. Did you forget to pay the bill? I took a slow breath. The kind you learn after decades of library work. Pause, think, then respond. No, I didn't forget. I froze the account. There was a silence so quick, it cut. Then her voice rose. What? Why would you do that? Everything's due this week. You're ruining my life, Mom. You can afford it. Her words stung, not because they were cruel, but because of how easily they came. I looked out the window. The clouds were breaking. Thin light spilling over the roses Graham had planted. My voice, when it came, surprised even me with its calm. I warned you. Mira, emergencies only. A party isn't one. You don't understand, she said. And I heard her trying to reshape the story, soften the edges. It wasn't just a party, it was important. Everyone was expecting I understand perfectly, I said, cutting in gently. You used something that wasn't yours because you assumed I'd make it right. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, fragile, like glass about to crack. Then a single sound, her exhale, sharp and trembling. Fine, she said finally, and the line went dead. I set the phone down on the table and sat very still. My heart was steady, but my hands trembled just enough to rattle the teaspoon against my mug. Outside, a wind passed through the yard, shaking loose the last yellow leaves. For the first time in years, the sound didn't make me flinch. Downtown Eugene was waking up when I parked in front of Rowe and Whitman Legal. The rain had finally stopped, and puddles along the sidewalk caught thin threads of morning light. I sat for a moment in the car, rehearsing what I would say, then stepped inside with my folder of bank papers and one of Graham's old envelopes holding the credit statement. Evelyn Rowe had been my attorney for years, steady, kind, the sort of woman who remembered birthdays but never small talk. Her office smelled faintly of cedar and coffee. She greeted me with a firm handshake, her gray curls pinned neatly behind one ear. "I heard what happened," she said after I explained. "Technically, this could be reported as elder financial exploitation." The word elder landed heavier than the rest. I let it sit between us, like something true but unwelcome. "I don't want to press charges," I said quietly. "I just want to be protected. I want her to know the rules have changed." Evelyn nodded, writing a few lines in her precise handwriting. "Then we'll make that clear in your will." By the time I left, the new documents listed the Eugene Public Library Foundation and an Elder Safety Trust as beneficiaries. Mira's name wasn't erased, it was simply moved to a place that required responsibility to earn its share. It felt fair. That afternoon, I stopped by the hardware store on Willamette Street and bought a new lock. Graham would have smiled at that, proud and amused that I insisted on installing it myself. It took longer than expected, but when the bolt clicked into place, the sound rang like punctuation at the end of a long sentence. I was still sweeping the stray brass shavings from the floor when someone knocked. A woman stood there holding a tin of cookies. "I'm June Marlowe," she said. "Just moved in across the street. I heard a bit of hammering, wanted to make sure you weren't wrestling a burglar." Her smile was warm, a little shy. I laughed for the first time in weeks. "Just a lock," I said, opening the door wider. "But you're welcome to come in anyway." By the time the tea cooled, the house no longer felt quite so empty. The morning began gray and windless, the kind of Oregon stillness that makes every sound stand out. I had just poured my first cup of tea when a car door slammed outside. Through the window, I saw Mira's blue sedan in the driveway. She climbed out, her coat half-buttoned. Darren following behind with the baby carrier. I opened the door before they could knock. "You're up early," I said, surprised by how even my voice sounded. Mira's eyes were already glassy. "We need to talk," she said. "You've gone too far. Mom, freezing the card. Calling lawyers, it's insane. I just wanted Ivy's day to be perfect." Her words rushed over me like cold water, perfect for who I asked softly. She blinked, caught off guard. For everyone. For my in-laws. For Darren's family. For Darren shifted awkwardly on the porch, his eyes down. The baby stirred, small and oblivious to the storm building above her. Mira's voice cracked. "You're being so cold. You've turned everything into rules and punishment. It's always been that way with you. Control, control, control." Her accusation landed harder than I expected. I thought of the years I'd spent paying bills quietly, smoothing out her mistakes so she could start again. Maybe that had looked like control from where she stood. I steadied myself against the doorframe. Boundaries aren't cold. Mira, they're how love survives heat. The words came out calm, but inside something tore. Mira's face twisted in disbelief. "You think this is love," she spat. "You're just proving why I didn't invite you." The silence that followed was thick enough to taste. Even the baby had gone quiet. Darren reached for Mira's shoulder, but she pulled away. Storming down the steps. "Let's go," she snapped. And he followed without a word. When the car pulled away, I noticed something on the porch swing, the baby's blanket. Soft yellow wool. The one I'd knitted before she was born. I picked it up carefully, smoothing the corner with my thumb. The scent of powder and milk still lingered. I folded it once, twice, and set it on the chair by the door. Some things, I thought, were meant to be held gently, even when you can't hold the person who left them. 3 days passed before I saw another car in the driveway. I had just finished watering the porch plants when a soft knock came at the door. When I opened it, Darren stood there alone, holding a folded envelope in his hands. He looked different without Mira beside him, tired, less defensive, almost unsure of how to begin. "Mrs. Winslow," he said quietly. "I hope it's all right that I stopped by." I nodded and stepped aside. "Come in, Darren." He sat at the table where the argument had begun a week earlier. Eyes fixed on the teacup I hadn't moved since that morning. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he drew a slow breath. "I wanted to apologize," he said. "I didn't realize the wedding expenses or the baby party were charged to your card. I should have asked questions." I folded my hands on the table. "It wasn't your responsibility to watch her," I said. "But I appreciate that you came." He slid the envelope toward me. "This is a cashier's check. It's half of what she spent. It doesn't fix things. But I thought it should come from me too." The envelope felt heavier than it should have. I didn't open it. "You don't have to do this," I said. "I do," he replied, meeting my eyes for the first time. Mira's been under a lot of pressure to keep up with my family. My mother's critical. She wanted everything to look perfect. And Mira took that too far. His honesty carried no excuses, only weariness. For a moment, I saw the man behind the polished smile in those photographs, the one who wanted peace. Not spectacle. "I hope she finds her footing," I said softly. "So do I." He stood, hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing." After he left, the house fell quiet again. The envelope sat untouched on the table. Its weight neither guilt nor comfort. Just proof that some people still understood the difference between decency and debt. It was late afternoon when the knock came. 3 soft raps. Uncertain, like someone hoping the door wouldn't open. I set down my pruning shears and wiped my hands on my apron before pulling the door back. Mira stood on the porch. Hair damp from rain, the baby pressed against her shoulder. Her eyes were swollen, her voice unsteady. "Mom," she said, barely above a whisper. "Darren's gone. He took a job in Seattle and left yesterday. I have nowhere else to go. Please, let me come home." For a moment, the air seemed to thicken between us. Ivy stirred in her arms. A small sound, half sigh, half cry. My chest tightened at the sight of her, the curve of her tiny hand, the faint smell of baby powder that still lingered on the yellow blanket I'd folded days ago. "Mira," I said slowly, "this isn't your home anymore." Her head snapped up, disbelief flashing in her eyes. "What are you talking about? I'm your daughter. I need you. You chose to close that door when you shut me out," I said, my voice steady even as my throat ached. "And I've learned to live with it open only from one side." She stepped closer, tears brimming. "You're cruel. How can you stand there and watch your own child fall apart?" I met her gaze, feeling something inside me loosen, not with anger but release. "I'm not being cruel, Mira," I said quietly. "I'm just finally being kind to myself." Her face crumpled, and for a second, I thought she might fall into my arms, but she didn't. She turned away, clutching Ivy closer, and walked down the path toward the car. Rain began again, soft and unrelenting. I stayed at the doorway long after the sound of the engine faded. My hands were steady at my sides. Though my heart felt bruised and raw, I didn't cry. I didn't move. I simply stood there, letting the cool air fill the space she'd left behind, wide, aching, and quietly free. The first frost came early that year. I noticed it one morning while collecting the newspaper, the edges of the roses glimmering silver, the air sharp enough to sting. That was when I saw the envelope wedged between the ads and the grocery coupons. My name written in Mira's unmistakable slant. I carried it inside and sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where every truth between us had surfaced. The envelope was thin, pale blue, no return address. I turned it over once before opening it. Mom. The first line read, "I used your card because I wanted everything to look perfect. I wanted Darren's family to think I had it all under control. I didn't see how wrong it was until he left. When the money disappeared, so did the illusion, and I was left with what I'd done." Her handwriting faltered in places, smudged where the ink had blurred. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope Ivy grows up to meet the version of you who taught me to read under the porch light, the one who never lost patience. Even when I stumbled over the same word again and again, I read those lines twice, then folded the letter slowly. The house was quiet, except for the faint creak of the heater. I went to the mantel, where the baby blanket still rested, folded in its square of soft yellow. I placed the letter beside it. For a long while, I stood there, my hands clasped, my breath even. The ache in my chest was still there, but it no longer burned. It simply existed, part of me, not my master. Through the window, morning light filtered through the bare branches. I thought of Ivy, small and unknowing, and of Mira, finally learning to name her mistakes. "Then maybe she will," I whispered, the words leaving my mouth like a small prayer. The morning light came through the window Graham had built years ago, catching the edges of the glass like gold threads. I stood by the sill, pruning shears in hand, and looked out at the rose bushes he'd planted on our 10th anniversary. They were in full bloom again, deep coral, stubborn against the chill, alive in a way that felt like memory finding color. June arrived just after 9, her scarf bright against the gray air. She carried a small paper bag that smelled of cinnamon and coffee. "The library's starting a literacy program for adults," she said as she poured sugar into her cup. "They're looking for volunteers. Thought of you immediately." It had been months since I'd set foot in the library, but the thought of being there again, helping someone else find their footing through words, stirred something gentle in me. "I'd like that," I said. "My time feels useful again." We sat for a while, talking about books and gardens, the kind of quiet conversation that asks for nothing in return. When she left, I lingered by the window, the scent of roses drifting in through the small gap Graham had once called a necessary imperfection. He said no window should ever be too tightly sealed. A little air keeps the house alive. On the ledge, I placed a small brass tag I'd had made at the hardware store. The engraving caught the sunlight just so peace earned, not given. I traced the letters with my finger, the metal still warm from my touch. On the armchair nearby, the yellow baby blanket lay folded neatly, soft and familiar. I lifted my teacup, watching the light ripple through the steam, and breathed in the stillness that had taken me a lifetime to learn. Outside, a breeze moved through the roses, steady and sure, and the house, my house, felt quietly whole again.